Hello, welcome inside Fever Insider Live. Brian Haenchen, Chloe Peterson here with you. Chloe, we've reached the end of the regular season.
Yes, we have. It's been a wild season.
It has been.
At least. It's been a wild month and a half.
It's been an emotional journey, I would describe it as. For you especially. Just a roller coaster of travel.
Yeah, fair.
Lots to get to today, obviously, between the all AP's All WNBA awards coming out. Kelsey Mitchell getting recognized there. Fever going into their series against Atlanta. But Chloe, it's been a minute since we've had one of these shows, kind of a general pod. So the best place to start is probably at the end of the regular season. And the fact that the Fever are coming into this on a 3-game win streak. They finished 24-20, franchise record for wins in the first time they have the back-to-back postseason appearances since 2015-16. So it's been about a decade. I'll let you take it from there and just your thoughts, observations on how this team finished going into the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, they finished winning 5 of their last 7 games, which I think, especially for a team that lost 5 players to a season-ending injury, that had to integrate 4 hardship players over the course of less than a month, I think. I think Odyssey Sims was the first hardship player to sign on August 10th. That was a month and 2 days ago. So to have that kind of finish when they've had all of the injuries, all of the integration of the hardship players, I think is especially impressive. Obviously a franchise record for wins, but it's also the first year that the W's had a 44-game season. So I don't put too much stock in that because I think they beat the WNBA. They beat the record where I believe they were like 23-12 or like 22-12 in a 34-game season. So I go more off of, winning percentage than just straight up wins because, we're kind of at the time in the league where they keep expanding the season. So people are obviously going to keep, making records, breaking records. So, but yeah, first back-to-back postseason appearances since 2015-16. Also, that was about the time when Stephanie White was the coach's Fever, or the Fever's coach. So yeah, Stephanie White coming back, obviously leading the Fever too, having as well of a coaching job as she's had with all these injuries, and obviously leading the Fever to the postseason again.
Obviously, the way the season wrapped up, and this is something you and I touched on late in the year, is that the schedule kind of set up nicely for the Fever. They were playing 2 teams that were eliminated in Chicago and Washington, and then a Minnesota team that would probably have nothing to play for. We saw Minnesota last night at full strength trying to win a game with the full roster, just kind of ramp up against the Valkyries, and they did so in pretty, I don't know if I'd call it decisive. It was decisive by the end, but it was
pretty
a very
decisive win.
Yeah, kind of an ugly game though, just in terms of scoring from the times that I peeked in on it. But in terms of what you saw with them playing, because you were obviously with them in Washington, saw the 2 home games when I was off. Just what were your impressions of how the teams looked down the stretch? Independent of the opposition.
I think they've really started to find a rhythm. Obviously, Odyssey Sims came in. She needed some time to adjust to, and Stephanie White has talked pretty consistently about kind of simplifying the offense in a way, like when Odyssey Sims came in, when Shea Petty came in, because they're the starting and backup point guards right now. And, they're expected to run the offense, but you also can't expect them to know all of the offense in a week or 2. So they kind of simplified it a lot when both of them came on. And now with, Odyssey Sims being here for about a month, Shea Petty being here for 3 weeks, they've kind of been able to ramp up, and they've been able to fit into a rhythm where all the other starters, all the other rotations are learning Sims, they're learning Shea Petty, they're learning how aerial powers play, and they're just finding that rhythm again like they had, at the beginning of the season.
And then you mentioned Aerial Powers. She's been playing some heavy minutes, 20 minutes a game basically here over the past few down the stretch. What have your impressions of her been? And also we should mention that she was in like a fender bender before a game, which is pretty perfect for how this season is going.
Yeah, she was. It was on the Friday of the Chicago Sky game. She was in a little fender bender, which was fortunately for the Fever not serious at all. And obviously we didn't know about it until she posted a vlog about it, I think on Sunday night. So thankful that she obviously didn't have anything serious, because that would just been another thing for the Fever. But she's really, I think, settled into her role, kind of backing up Lexi Hull too. Like, she was just yet another one of those people who had to come in. I think she only had a shoot around before the Minnesota game on August 24th before she kind of just went into the game. And she's been the role player, I think, that they really needed. They can rely on her for, 8 points a game at least. And she can grab rebounds. She's really she fights for those rebounds, and she's exactly, I think, who they need off the bench.
We should mention, too, as we move and start looking ahead, Kelsey Mitchell today garners AP all WNBA honors. Actually, Chloe, I should ask you. I apologize. Is there anything else you wanted to touch on with the regular season before we get to Kelsey Mitchell in the postseason?
I don't think so.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to get back to what I was saying. And Kelsey Mitchell, all at WNBA first team, second player in franchise history to be named to that honor. Chloe got a question into Kelsey today about that, so we're going to play that clip right now.
Press named you all WNBA first team. What does that mean to you to kind of get that honor?
Very humbling. You guys kind of know who I am by now, but I know it's big for where I come from as far as my legacy and the name I represent. Mitchell means a lot to me. You guys know about my dad and losing home in 2024, so it hits home a little bit more different. It's less about the accolade and more about the pain and all that stuff that I kind of had to go through to get here. So it was a big moment for me and my family personally because of how much we've been through, how much I've been through. It's not to say that other people don't go through things, but it was big for our family and me personally.
I didn't have a chance to listen to that clip. I just kind of clipped the start, clip the finish. That's pretty obviously thoughtful, but a pretty cool response from her and kind of puts into perspective everything and the significance of that honor for Kelsey Mitchell.
Yeah, I mean, she's had a tough, especially last season was pretty tough for her. She lost her dad in pretty suddenly in March, I believe it was, of 2024. So just a month or two before the 2024 season. And then, I wrote about it at the beginning of this season that, her dad was her coach throughout high school. He was actually an assistant coach at Ohio State when she played at Ohio State. And he was her trainer for, the first 7 years she was in the WNBA before he died. And I think obviously she does a lot thinking of him when she plays basketball, and her family, obviously she's very close to her family. Obviously her mom, she has a twin sister. She has 2 brothers who are also twins. And I know she's told me she goes back to see them in Cincinnati whenever humanly possible on any off day. And obviously Indianapolis is only an hour and a half away from Cincinnati. So she's able to make it a day trip. But yeah, I think, especially kind of in the context of what she's gone through over the past few years. And then obviously at the beginning of this season, she broke her finger in China. She never had the opportunity to get that fixed. And she's been playing the entire season on a broken finger on her shooting hand, which I feel like we forgot about as the season went on just because she was playing so well, but she still has a broken finger. And she's just shooting lights out despite that.
Which is insane. Okay, so I'm going to ask you, because we've been party to a couple of them. What would you select as like her signature performance this season? Which one, when you think of her season, which one jumps out to you immediately?
Oh, I don't know.
Like, I'll go for, I think of the Chicago one. Maybe it's just because we were sitting there and just in awe where she exploded. But, I mean, gosh, there's just been so many where she matched that total. Again, just a couple weeks later, again, on the broken finger, which is nuts.
Yeah.
The 34 burger against LA in a loss. The 34 again in Phoenix in a loss. I mean, 29, I'm sorry. I was looking at the minutes. The 38 against Connecticut really stands out in that wild game where they came back from 20 back in August. I mean, there's so many to choose from. I was wondering if one jumped out to you.
Yeah, I would say probably that Chicago game where she dropped 35, and they're in that same game. She looked like she was in a bit of pain. Mm-hmm. If we remember, it looked like, and ever since that game at Chicago, I've kind of noticed, there have been times where she'll be grimacing. She's obviously playing through some stuff with, she's been the leader of this team, especially with, Caitlin Clark being limited to just 13 games with various injuries. And I think at this point in the season, obviously kind of every player who's still healthy is feeling it, but I've especially noticed Kelsey has been feeling it. She grimaces at times. She still plays through everything, and she's still able to put up, those 35 points against Chicago, or 38 against Connecticut, or 29 against Phoenix. It's just she just plays through basically everything.
But to your point about her grimacing, I think it might have been maybe the Washington game where she went down to make a play on defense, came up limping, and looked to be in some serious pain, and just wasn't quite herself the rest of the game, and still put up, I think, a big number. But yeah, to your point, we've kind of talked about it, probably on the show too, but she's definitely been playing through something, which adds another layer to just the fact that she's been able to stay in there and fight through this and put up the numbers that she has. And I mean, the biggest moments seem to bring out the best in her, which is what the Fever have needed this season with all the injuries they're dealing with. So that's impressive. Not to mention, too, her stepping into that point guard position during that especially tumultuous period when there were no healthy point guards, and she had to be the one to kind of take that up with Sophie Cunningham there.
Yeah. I mean, she's been able to do basically she's stepped up to whatever they need from her. She had that. It was a different game against Chicago where she was basically the emergency point guard. And she had 8 assists that game, I remember. And it was just, she's been able to do anything the team needs her to do while still putting up the numbers that makes her a first-team All-WNBA player.
Let's put up the awards here, Chloe. We were talking about this very briefly before we hopped on here. Any surprises to you as you look over the All-WNBA awards from the AP? And we should note, too, that these are different from the league awards. These are from the Associated Press. Yes. The league awards proper, the ones that you vote in, correct? Those will come out here over the coming weeks. Yes,
they're technically different, but usually they end up being pretty similar, I would say, every year. I'm not surprised by most of this. I know, obviously, Nafisa Collier has been the kind of favorite when it comes to MVP or Player of the Year, I guess the AP calls it, this entire season. But I think what really hurt her MVP case is the fact that she missed 11 games this season, which in a 44-game season is 25% of the year. Mm-hmm. And, in my All-WNBA ballot, I voted for A'ja Wilson just mostly because of that, where, A'ja Wilson has been leading her team on I think they're 16-0 now. They were 14-14 at the beginning of August, and now they're 30-14. Led by A'ja Wilson. I think Nafisa Collier has just missed too many games this season, 25% of the season, for her, and that really hurt her MVP case, I will say. She's obviously still going to get votes. I think Alyssa Thomas is going to get votes. I think, obviously, A'ja Wilson is going to get votes. But Rookie of the Year, Paige Beckers, I wouldn't be surprised if it was unanimous. Obviously, the AP doesn't put out who voted what or what the voting totals were, but when it comes to the WNBA, I wouldn't be surprised if that was unanimous. Natalie Nakase, also pretty obvious, just because she's the first, or Golden State is the first team or first expansion team to ever make the playoffs. Mm-hmm. And that's just a Coach of the Year feat in itself, because they drafted a ton of seventh players even, because teams were able to protect their top 6. And they went in the expansion draft, took a lot of 7th players. They didn't get a big get in free agency either, because I think it's valid that, no big free agent really wanted to buy into an expansion team just with the history of expansion teams not being good. But what they've been able to do in Golden State with that kind of roster is deserving of Coach of the Year, I would say.
Absolutely.
And then most improved player, Veronica Burton, also, I think, a shoo-in. I think 6th player of the year, Naz Hillman, that is going to be, I think a toss-up between her or Natisha Heidemann when it comes to WNBA awards, because I think Naz Hillman, she started 17 games of the 44-game season, and I think Natisha Heidemann, she was a true 6th player off the bench kind of situation. So it's kind of just what you consider there. But I think all of it is it's all going to be pretty similar to what the WNBA awards end up being.
Any other thoughts and observations on that before we pivot to the big show?
I don't think so. It looks the first team for AP. I obviously didn't vote in AP, but that's the same first team I had for my all WNBA vote. So
do you expect Kelsey Mitchell to get the nod there?
I do. I've seen of the people who have, released their WNBA votes, Kelsey Mitchell is on most of them. So I expect her to be in that first team conversation. That also means she's going to be in the MVP conversation because you vote for your top 5 for MVP when it comes to the WNBA voting. So she's going to get some of those MVP votes.
No centers on here, including Noah Leah Boston from the Indiana Fever. Surprised and thoughts on her exclusion from the all WNBA teams by the AP?
I thought she was kind of on the fringe of all WNBA. Obviously, she's had a great season, but I think there's also some kind of obviously Neko Ogwumike is obviously similar positioning. Neko Ogwumike has been great for 12 years, however long she's been in the WNBA. So I think, when you go into choosing Nneka Ogwumike versus Aaliyah Boston or Jackie Young versus Aaliyah Boston for that second team spot, usually people kind of veer towards those players who have more experience in the league. So I'm not too surprised on it, but it could go either way, I thought.
They're all numbers are basically identical here as we type on that. Aaliyah Boston, 15 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists. Ogwumike, 18 points, 7 rebounds, 2 assists. And then Jackie Young, the Princeton graduate and Miss Basketball for Indiana, 17 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists. So pretty steady there across the board. I just thought that was interesting. Saw some discourse. As we pivot into the playoffs, encourage everybody to get involved with their comments, questions. Love to hear your predictions on Atlanta versus Indiana, so you go ahead and drop those in there. Chloe, we'll just let you have the floor here. Just some general thoughts on Atlanta versus Indiana. They split the regular season series 2-2. All the games were close, but they haven't played since July 11th.
Yeah, I think Indiana is a much better matchup I think Atlanta is a much better matchup for Indiana than the Aces would have been. Obviously, the Fever beat the Aces 2-1 in the regular season series, but those were all before Las Vegas started this monster 16-game win streak. So I think Las Vegas has all of the momentum on their side right now. And also, if you believe momentum is a real thing, I listened to a podcast once about how momentum isn't real, but that's beside the point.
I'm sorry, did you say you did a podcast?
I listened to a podcast
I thought you were hosting a side pod.
No. Pablo Torre did a podcast on if momentum was real a few years ago when he was still with ESPN Daily. I thought it was interesting, but that's beside the point. Anyway, I think Las Vegas also obviously has the experience of they have a lot of the same pieces that they had when they won the championship in 2022 and 2023. They obviously have Asia Wilson. They have Jackie Young. And I think their team is very connected at this point, especially on that 16-game win streak, going from literally 500 to 16 games above 500. And I think Indiana kind of matches up better in a way with Atlanta, even though Atlanta, the biggest problem Indiana is going to have with Atlanta is that size with Brittany Griner, with Brianna Jones. Obviously, Ryan Howard is a big guard, Naz Hillman, big guard. So they're going to have problems with the size, but they've also figured out ways to get around that too, obviously with the 2-2 record. And I think the Fever have an advantage in, a convoluted way of the last time the Fever and the Dream played was on July 11th. And that was, Erin McDonald was still playing, So Sydney Colson was still playing. Caitlin Clark was still playing. Sophie Cunningham was still there. They have almost a completely different team at this point, from July 11th to now. So that's a lot of, a lot more film scouting that the Dream are going to have to do, and a lot less experience they have playing, players like Odyssey Sims, playing aerial powers and playing in that. Obviously, they try to keep the system similar, or the Fever try to keep the system similar with Sims running the offense, but it's still going to be a little bit different than if Caitlin Clark was running the offense, if Ari McDonald's running the offense, Sydney Colson. So I think in a way they have the advantage of they're kind of a completely just different team.
Yeah. And like you said, I mean, they're grooving now too. The offense surely looks a little different than what Atlanta's used to. Obviously, it's different because it's a little simplified, but it's still different than what they've scouted. So like you said, it's going to be starting from scratch. That's going to be interesting. And then the size thing, though, I feel like that's what everybody go back to there with Brittany Griner, Naz Hillman, Brown and Jones, and some of those big pieces there.
Yeah, I mean, Aaliyah Boston has had, I think, issues with Brittany Griner, kind of when they've matched up, past couple of years when BG was in Phoenix, and then this year when obviously BG is in Atlanta. And then I think a lot of people have issues with Brittany Griner because she's 6'9". And I think the next tallest player is Camila Cardoso, but then you could have a drop where nobody else is that tall. So when BG gets in the paint, she can just turn around and shoot with nobody guarding her barely. So Brittany Griner has a very specific, scout, and you have to keep her out of the paint. You can't let her just post up on the basket because she can just get those shots easily.
Yeah, as you were talking there, I was trying to quickly dig up Brittany Griner's stats versus the Indiana Fever. Last time out on May 20th, Brittany Griner went for 21 points, 8 rebounds, a couple assists, and a block in 31 minutes played there. So obviously, Leah Boston will have her work cut out there. In terms of style of play, does anything there, unsettle you, or is it of concern? How do the Fever match up with them stylistically?
I mean, the Dream have completely revamped, I think, since obviously Carl Smesko became their head coach. I was kind of trepidatious on this style that Smesko plays, especially with who they brought in the offseason, because he likes to play a 5-out, heavy three-pointer kind of style. And then they brought in, Brittany Griner, Brianna Jones, who are two of them. They're both starting fives, which I wasn't sure how that was going to work in the first place. And then secondly, how is that going to work? And if he wants to play a 5-out offense, but he's really kind of made it so they are making threes. Like, I think the biggest example of it is Naz Hillman, where she made, I think I read she made 3 3-pointers in her first 3 seasons total. And I believe it's 53 she's made this season alone. So he's really encouraging, the people who don't take those 3-pointers, like Brittany Griner's taking more 3-pointers, Brianna Jones, Naz Hillman, they're all kind of adjusting to this kind of 5-out offense while also having the post threats that are BG and Brianna Jones. And that's just what makes them so difficult to guard.
I was skimming through past results and then realizing there's really no point in digging too deep into those past results because half the players aren't even playing anymore playing currently for the Fever. So that's kind of dumb. It makes this a little more difficult to preview. I'm interested. I mean, this feels like a winnable series, but as you handicap it now, how good do you think the Fever's odds are of advancing?
My guess is the Dream are going to come out of it in 3 games. But they're going to be 3 close games. I wouldn't be surprised if the Fever, shocked the Dream and made it to the second round, which is why I think it was a much better matchup for the Fever, for the Dream versus the Aces, because the Fever could conceivably beat the Dream, I would think, in the 3-game series, but I didn't think there was really much chance the Fever could beat the Aces, especially with how high the Aces are rising right now and, the injury issues, hardship issues the Fever have had. But, if the Fever were the team, they were 2 months ago before all the injuries, I would definitely pick the Fever, but they're obviously not this team right now. But I think obviously the hardships, everything, them having to readjust, them still simplifying the offense at this point in going into the postseason, which is something they obviously can't help do with, Odyssey Sims has still only been on the Fever for a month now. But I think the Dream, they haven't had the injury issues. They have the size advantage too, especially with, I think they mentioned in the comments that losing Caitlin makes the size difference worse, which is good, which is true because Caitlin was, a tall guard, 6 foot, and Odyssey Sims is shorter, Shea Petty's shorter, Kelsey Mitchell is, 5'8", obviously, so they don't have that size that can compete with Atlanta as much as they did before the injuries, even with Sophie Cunningham being 6'1" and someone who can, help guard the post too.
Mm-hmm. ESPN, by the way, their computers give the Dream a 68.1% chance of advancing, a 15.3% chance of winning the title. For the Indiana Fever, on the other side, 36.3% chance of advancing, a 3.1% chance at winning the title. And that comment that Chloe alluded to is right there.
I think that's fair. Those are fair percentages.
Another comment, and again, we encourage folks to get involved here. We'll do the Q&A stuff towards the end here and just kind of pick our spots. Until then, I think the Fever need to utilize their speed and defend without fouling. Can't send them to the line a ton.
That's true.
That's
something Stephanie White has mentioned, and Natasha Howard mentioned too when we talked to her yesterday, that they need to defend without fouling. They've had those foul issues before, and that what I remember specifically is their last game against the Mercury on September 2nd. I think Phoenix went to the line 23 times and Indiana went to the line 8 times. So that's obviously a very big difference that they need to limit as much as possible.
Yeah, I was going to try and look up here. The Fever allowing an average of 17.8 free throws per – oh, wait, that was last season. My apologies. I was going to try and dig that up. I will continue to here. Let's talk about the playoffs abroad here, Chloe. Here's the bracket here. You have Minnesota, the top seed that's been known for a while, open up against Golden State. You have Phoenix, New York. You have Seattle versus the Aces, and down there at the bottom, hidden beneath the banner, you have, of course, the Atlanta Dream and Indiana Fever. What do you make of these other series here as we get things kind of ramped up?
Well, I think the most interesting series will really be Phoenix, New York, because New York kind of was on not like a downfall entirely, but they started the season, I think, 9-0. And then since then they dropped down to the 5 seed. And they're not even they're the reigning champions, and they're not even hosting the first round. Mm-hmm. So I think obviously injuries impacted a lot of that. Sabrina Ionescu missed time with an injury. Brianna Stewart missed, I think, a month with a bone bruise in her left knee. Niara Sabali missed some time. Natasha Cloud broke her nose, missed some time. But all of those players, I believe they're all back at this point. And I think they're going to have some kind of underdog mentality, especially being the reigning champions, not hosting the first round, kind of dropping down to the 5 seed. So that's going to be an interesting one to watch. And I think Las Vegas, Seattle, they've always been chippy this year, especially with Jewel Lloyd requesting a trade out of Seattle and then going to Las Vegas. So that's going to be really interesting. That's going to be really interesting, if only just for the drama. And then Minnesota and Golden State, I mean, that one's interesting, I think, just because Golden State's an expansion team, and they're the first expansion team in the league to ever make the playoffs in their first year. But I don't think they're going to make it very far past Minnesota, especially if you consider I don't remember the specific score on last night, but I believe it was like a 20-point win by Minnesota against Golden State. And
a Golden State team, by the way, that was playing for something, specifically the opportunity to avoid playing Minnesota in the first round.
So I think, Minnesota is going to get through that first round pretty easily.
Real quickly, circling back to the Fever discussion, I found the number 19.5 opponent free throw attempts per game allowed by the Fever, third worst in the league, 15.3 makes. Conversely, Atlanta giving up just 15.8 attempts per game, which is second best in the league. So it's 4 points there, and given how that regular season series went, that could be a big determining factor. If you had to pick a winner, Chloe, who do you think's going through?
Like winning the finals?
Between these 4 series, let's do semifinals first.
Well, I think Minnesota's winning against Golden State. I don't know if I can pick against the Liberty just because they're the reigning champions.
Mm-hmm. Reigning champions and healthy, right?
Yeah. So I'll pick the Liberty for this one. I'll probably do Las Vegas just because they're on a tear, and then Atlanta.
Then who you got going to the finals? And
Las Vegas and Minnesota. And then
Solid.
Minnesota wins.
All right. Mark it down, folks. Place your bets now.
Yeah.
Chloe has spoken. And as we know, when Chloe speaks, we all listen and make money. Chloe, that's all that I had organizationally. Is there anything else you wanted to touch on before we dip into the comments for a couple minutes?
I mean, this is kind of part of the comments of the arena that.
Oh, yeah. We should talk about that.
That the Dream play-in. I've been to the arena. It is very small. 3,500 capacity for basketball. And I don't know if it's necessarily them not planning. I'm not entirely sure. Obviously, they can't move to State Farm Arena because Dua Lipa is performing there on Sunday night. And I think what they mentioned, I believe it was Front Office Sports that reported they moved one game this season against the Fever to State Farm Arena, but only one of the two. The other was played at the Gateway Center. And they said it was because of obviously rising rental costs when it comes to State Farm Arena, because the Atlanta Dream are not owned by the Atlanta Hawks. So they're separate entities, separate organizations. So I think that really plays into it a lot, that they have to rent out State Farm Arena that at the same rate that, Dua Lipa has to, or whatever other organization, basketball team, or whoever wants to rent out State Farm Arena, they have to rent it at the same rate that, any other place does. And they have talked pretty frequently, like Dream Ownership's talked about plans to build a new arena, build a new practice facility all down in Atlanta somewhere, but that's obviously not happening right now. And I think the plan was always for them to play in the Gateway Center, even with a capacity of 3,500.
It's going to be a fun college-like atmosphere.
Yeah.
I mean, it sucks that it's going to be so few fans, but the fans who are there are going to want to be there. It's going to be packed. It's going to be loud. I'm jealous that you get to experience that. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, it's kind of similar to the Baltimore arena. It was still smaller. I think it was like 12,000 people that came, but it was still like very loud.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I think, something that's the same with Atlanta. It's small, but it can reverberate. It can get really loud in there.
Did it, as you were walking around pregame, is that arena, is it one of those where it feels like the crowds are kind of on top of like you experienced that a little bit at the college arena? Is it that way too, where like those teams are playing?
Yeah, I think so. It's like obviously just one section. They're pretty close to the court, to pretty close to the benches. So it's going to be up close and personal, I think.
I love that. That's going to be so much fun. Let's see here. We got a comment, a prediction here. Hot take. I predict 1-2 upsets. I think the Valks could get hot for one away game and take their home game. And if you consider Liberty over Merck an upset, and I really believe the Fever can win 2. The Valks is probably the hottest of those takes. Would you consider Liberty over Mercury an upset? I don't know that I would.
I mean, on paper, obviously it would be, but I wouldn't consider it like an actual legitimate upset, just because they're so close in the standings too, obviously 4-5. So I think either one could take it.
And I really believe the Fever can win 2. It feels like game 1 might decide this series, because I think the Fever are going to win at home. I don't know, a game 3 on the road. Too. Game 3 on the road, congested schedule. It just I don't know if they'll have enough to get over that hump.
Yeah, my gut says I think that Atlanta's going to win it, but I wouldn't be surprised that if Indiana pulls out an upset, just because of especially how they finish the season and kind of the rhythm they're finding too.
They're one of those teams that every time I've even had like an inkling of doubt, and I mean I've mentioned to you plenty of times where I'm like, okay, this is where the bottom's going to fall out. This is where all this BS is going to catch up to them. BS being the injuries and the freakish things where literally nobody can stay healthy. Finally catches up to them, and every time they bounce back, every time without bail. And I mean, this would just be in line with how this entire season has gone if they were to pull this off in advance of the next round. Do you think one round is kind of the ceiling for this group, Chloe?
Yeah, I would say, I wouldn't be surprised obviously if they beat Atlanta, but then I don't think they could really get past the Aces, especially with, the team the Aces have and, just the rise that they're on.
Mm-hmm.
It's just it's like the Aces are just a wall. I think about at this point. And I think, Nalissa Smith being traded to the Aces really kind of elevated them in a way I don't think really anybody expected. Because Nalissa Smith and Asia Wilson just pair so well together in the front court. And obviously the Aces probably thought that when they traded for Nalissa from Dallas, but I don't even think they anticipated how well it would be working because they have been very good just together in the front court. And I think that's really elevated them to this championship level or team.
Do you think Seattle wins a game, or do you think that Las Vegas goes in there on an 18-game win streak?
I don't know. I could see Vegas, Vegas just sweeping and getting out in 2.
Yeah, I agree. This in regard to the Beaver, 2 of their last 3 games are against non-playoff teams. The Lynx weren't playing their best player. The last 3 games can't really be used as a measure against the Dream. I think that's fair.
That's fair.
And true. I think that's why I asked at the beginning to ask Chloe just what she was seeing out there, independent of the opponents, because like Ashley points out, I mean, it's 3 teams in a row, not with nothing really to play for down the stretch, but the Fever took advantage, a thing that earlier in the season they didn't do. See the Washington game before the crazy comeback in Connecticut, which, again, they were on death's doorstep and down 20 in the second half or whatever it was. And in quite the pickle. Back to moving the game. If we need a game 3, they can move it then. But if they're Atlanta, I don't want to move it. I don't need any more Fever fans to give them any more momentum. I don't think they'd move a game 3 at this point, right? I mean, with television being what it is, it just seemed like it'd be a bit of a hassle. Here's a CBA question, our soon-to-be favorite thing. Since they don't have a new CBA, do you know if they're locked out after they are done in the playoffs, or can they use the facilities beyond that until the 10/31 date?
I don't know the question for that. I would think they wouldn't be locked out like after the playoffs. And I think it also could depend on, each team too, because obviously we saw last season Caitlin Clark was working out in the Fever's facility, in the winter, basically year round. But I wouldn't be surprised if, teams who have players under contract, like the Fever with Caitlin Clark, Leah Boston, they still let them use the facilities. I'm not sure if it's a league-wide thing where they can't use facilities after, October 31st, or I would think it's a case-by-case basis. And obviously the free agents, most of the veterans in the league are free agents. So they wouldn't I think those free agents after the playoffs are over, they would kind of lose access in a way where they're obviously don't know if they're going to be on the team next year. So why would they be in the facilities? But the players who are under contract, obviously Caitlin, Aaliyah, KK, Timpson, they're the only ones who are officially under contract for the Fever next year. Lexi Hull's a restricted free agent, but that obviously is still free agency. I think it will depend on each team and how much they want to give the players, because I think no matter the CBA, Caitlin Clark is going to be on the Fever next year. Aaliyah Boston's going to be on the Fever next year. So I don't see why they would lock them out of the facility in that way.
You mentioned Lexi Hull being a restricted free agent. Is she back next year, you think?
I think so. I think she really likes Indianapolis. she talked about buying a house here. Her fiance is here. He has a job here. And I think she fits in really well to the scheme. I think it'll be interesting to see who they protect. I mean, everything's up in the air when it comes to the CBA, the expansion draft, because I just don't know what's going to happen. Because last year, if they protect 6 players the same way, I would see them protecting, obviously, Caitlin Clark, Aaliyah Boston, Kelsey Mitchell, because Kelsey has another year where they can core her, give her the Supermax. And then protecting Lexi Hull. She's a restricted free agent, protecting Michaela Timpson. So that's 5. And then you can technically protect unrestricted free agents like Sophie Cunningham, like Natasha Howard, but you can protect them. But there's also technically, if we go off the rules of last year's expansion draft, teams can only protect, or expansion teams can only pick one unrestricted free agent who hasn't used up all their core years. So it wouldn't make sense under those circumstances for Indiana to protect Natasha Howard, because Natasha Howard's used all her core years. She can do whatever she wants no matter what.
So she's the de facto protected player, in effect.
She's de facto protected. But they could protect Sophie Cunningham because Sophie Cunningham hasn't never been cored. But then also, with most of the veterans in the league being free agents, the Fever can basically have those 6, and that's basically everyone.
Yeah.
And everyone else is free agents. So, and if the expansion teams can only protect one free agent, or can only pick one free agent or unrestricted free agent, then how are they going to build a team when most of the league are free agents, and then all the teams can protect basically the players they have under contract?
This is why Chloe's the best, is because she spends her time in the layovers and when she's not at Gainbridge Fieldhouse studying how shot clocks work. Shout out shot clock malfunctions. I'm really excited to go back and cover a game with you because I think you're cursed, so that'll be fun with the delays. She also loves the hardship waiver stuff. Like, she could teach a masterclass on that, and that's why we love Chloe Peterson as the Fever beat writer. She's great. Sophie Cunningham. Somebody asked this, and I was about to ask you it. What about Sophie Cunningham? Is she back next year?
I would think so. She's talked very highly about being in Indiana, and how much she loves being in Indiana, even versus her first 7 years in the league when she was in Phoenix. And obviously it's closer to home for her from Missouri. And I think she's really talked about how much she loves, obviously, playing with Caitlin Clark, playing under Stephanie White. I would think it likely she's back next year, especially with how this year was cut short, obviously with her ankle injury to begin the season and then this MCL injury that kind of cut her out for the season on August 17th.
How different do you think this team is going to look next year? Like, are you expecting some massive changes, or do you think it'll be generally the same team with a couple maybe players added in? I would think Ari McDonald's one that you'd want to bring back if possible, but she might be an expansion pick.
Yeah, I think the core players, Kelsey Mitchell, Aaliyah Boston, Caitlin Clark, they're, I would say, most likely to be back. Obviously, Caitlin Clark, Aaliyah Boston are going to be back. Sure. Unless, they demand a trade, which, first of all, I don't see them doing. And second of all, I don't know if the Fever would do that. So those two obviously back. And I think Kelsey Mitchell pretty heavily likely to be back. Sophie Cunningham, too. I think she enjoys it here. Natasha Howard. She's talked about, coming back home in a way because she started her career in Indiana. Her family is from, I believe it's Dayton, Ohio, somewhere in Ohio. So she's closer to home now too. So I think she has a high likelihood of coming back. Because it seems like one of those vibes where you want to end your career where you started. And she's obviously getting to the final years of her career. And she's been, that veteran voice that, the Fever have really needed. We were talking to her yesterday about the playoffs. She's made the playoffs in 11 of her 12 seasons.
Damn.
And we asked if she feels anything different going into the playoffs versus playing in the regular season. She was like, no, it's a game. It's the same. We have to win it.
Oh, that's awesome.
I was like, okay, cool. And she said something along the lines of like, players who are in their first, second, or third years in the playoffs, they might feel something different, but I don't. I was like,
cool, thanks. I'm just fishing for a good quote here, but thank you.
So, so she is that veteran voice, I think, that the Fever really needed, especially with they brought in Natasha Howard and they obviously brought in DeWanna Bonner, but then everything happened with Bonner, who eventually left the team. So Natasha Howard has really been that veteran voice that I think they've needed, especially with a team that doesn't have much playoff experience. But
question 2, perfectly timed about the Toledo native. Will she be back next year? Leans yes, kind of if the rules are the same, depending on the draft, it's almost a lock. And if so, this is where it's interesting. Would the team want her to be a starter again or a veteran presence off the bench?
I think I would think she'd still be a starter, assuming she would want to return to the Fever. She's had a pretty good season this year. All things considered, I think there have been some games where she's, kind of fallen off more than others, but she's really kind of come into it with playing with Aaliyah too. And I think she's a good pair with Boston as well. So I think she would still be in a starting role if she decided to return to the Fever.
What about Sydney Colson? Do you think that she's going to – have you heard anything? I should ask. I apologize for putting you on the spot. Have you heard? Is she going to try and give it a go beyond this season? What are her plans for the future, and where do you think that Sid's going to end up?
I have not heard anything kind of when it comes to plans for the season for her, but it's also – she tore her ACL in August 7th, and that's at least a 12-month, 13-month recovery, give or take. Cam Brink – obviously is 23 years old. She took 13 months to come back. So kind of Sid Colson at 35 years old could take 12, 13, maybe even longer to come back. So that may just take out of the equation all of the next WNBA season, especially even if it takes 13 months, that's next September. And that's the season essentially being over. So I'm not sure if she's going to be on the team in an official capacity next season, just because I'm not sure if she'll be able to return in time. But I guess, I haven't heard anything specifically on if she is aiming to play, but I guess we'll see on that.
She seems like one of those two that, obviously you have a limited number of roster spots, but just a good person to have inside the room. Yeah. And that's something that Stephanie White talked a lot about, is just having good people beyond the basketball things, and that being a big reason for the success. And Sydney Colson certainly seems to fit that brand. Her speech at the game the other night was phenomenal.
That's true. I forgot about that. Like, Stephanie White loves, the culture piece, and I think Natasha Howard is really good for the culture piece. Obviously, Sydney Colson is, and she's talked a lot about how that is. She thinks that's how they've been able to have this surge in a way where they're staying together. These 5 season-ending injuries didn't sink them, because they've had these players where, obviously Sydney Colson is still a big part of their team, even being injured. And Sophie Cunningham too, Ari McDonald, Caitlin Clark is obviously still going to practices, still being around everybody. So I think that's a big piece of, how the culture has continued even with these injuries.
It'll be fascinating, too, to see how this franchise next year, next couple of years, how it evolves in just terms of being a destination for these free agents.
Yeah.
Is this, as it becomes, obviously Caitlin Clark's a big going to be a draw for players who want to play with her, but just the culture component, too. I'm curious to see how that works as well. Caitlin Clark is done for the year. If you get past the dream, can she be activated? Maybe, but
I think hypothetically she could, but I don't think they will do that. I think if they thought she could come back for a potential playoff run, they wouldn't have ruled her out, for the season.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think hypothetically when it comes to league rules, yeah, she could be activated, but I think, obviously she's still working. She's still trying to ramp up with just getting back to basketball playing shape. But I think this is kind of just one of those situations where obviously the Fever in practices at this point, they need to work on the players they have available. And they were trying to integrate, Caitlin into that, kind of starting on August 22nd when she came back to the team. But at this point, when it's in the postseason, they need to, kind of focus on the people they have available. So there's not much practice time. There's not much practice time in of itself when it comes to the playoffs, but there's also not much practice time to potentially integrate her back into the team, especially with her being out for so long.
And honestly, it was a talking point last year too. And I mean, the woman has played so much basketball over the past few years, just kind of nonstop. The time off isn't the worst thing in the world, honestly. If they're out for the season, do they still take part in the exit interviews? I would assume so, but you would know better than I.
Yeah. It kind of just depends. Even on any team, it depends. I know, obviously, some teams don't do exit interviews at all. Like, I think the Aces last year didn't do exit interviews really at all. The Fever had every single player talk. And there were some teams where only some players talked, or like the key players talked, and some teams, like it completely varies by team or by franchise. So I think, usually I would expect, Caitlin to talk at some point. If not, and the most likely time would be exit interviews.
If we get her on the show, do you think we'd crash the Indy Star website?
Yeah, I don't know if that's like Taylor Swift new heights.
I think so.
Break the record.
Her and then whenever we get Tony on this show, maybe Tony and Alexa, those will be the two. First it'll be those two, so we'll get a taste of it.
Yeah.
Then we'll bring on Caitlin, and all hell will break loose. Maybe we'll do it from a golf course. That would be my dream. Me, you, and your fiance can golf.
Yeah.
You can sit in the cart, just chat it up with Caitlin. I'll pop in some questions in between drives. I think this is in regards to Natasha Howard. I was just curious of your thoughts. Caitlin was hurt this year, but I'm assuming Natasha Howard and Caitlin Clark didn't really seem to work well this year, and she can't space the floor and doesn't clear the lane for the PNR with pick and roll with Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also part of it is Caitlin, I don't think really had a game where she was not injured in some way.
I agree.
So she obviously had that groin issue that kept her out of the first week of preseason, missed that first preseason game, and then missed those 5 games with a groin strain, came back for 5 games, missed more time with the left groin, came back for 5 games, then missed the rest of the season. So I think they didn't have a lot of practice time to work on that either. So obviously CC and AB worked well together. So we worked well all of last year together. But that was still like when they all first started together, when Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston first started, the beginning of the 2024 season, that was a work in progress too. And they came into it as the season went on. But I think Natasha Howard, Caitlin Clark, and AB didn't have, a lot of time to just work together.
This is a good question here. We'll be very interested to hear from Caitlin Clark after all this time. She hasn't gone this long without doing media in a while, I bet. I would agree with that. What do you want to pick her brain about most? And I'll start this one, Chloe, because it feeds off something that you said where you didn't think she's been healthy all year. That's kind of what I would want to ask her. One of the questions would just be, how long has she been compromised? Because at the beginning of the year, it kind of looked like she was off. Like her shot kind of looked a little flatter. She wasn't just – there was something off a little bit, and then these injuries happened. So that's one thing that I would be curious about is just how long she has been injured, like coming into the season, was she compromised, that sort of thing. What about you?
Yeah, kind of going off that there was that stretch where she went, I think it was like 1 for 25 or 1 for something really big from 3-point range. There were multiple games where she didn't make a 3 when she didn't make a 3 in only one of her college games and made a 3 all of last season's games. So that would be, I think, to your point, a really interesting one. And I think another one would be, just how much she wanted to ramp up to come back, because obviously, they waited until the final 3 games of the regular season to rule her out for the year. And, she talked about in her post, how badly she wanted to come back. And I think something that would be interesting to hear from Caitlin would be what those discussions were like with Stephanie White, with her trainers, with the front office of like, what was the deciding factor to kind of shut her down for the season.
I kind of wonder too with an athlete, like when does it kind of dawn on you? Because I'm sure there's a denial phase where like it's kind of obvious that it's not going to happen this year. But when do you kind of move past the denial of that, and does it kind of sink in for you? That'd be interesting too. I mean, it's been a trying season for her, obviously, and yeah, I agree. Off-season wise, I'll be most interested to see how long it takes Caitlin Clark to decide on off-season plans. I assume, Ben, that you're referencing what is it?
Unrivaled.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but assuming that, Chloe, what's your gauge on what she's looking to do off-season wise?
I mean, I find it unlikely that she would do Unrivaled. Unrivaled president Alex Basil, he did an interview with ESPN. He said they had 90% of their roster like filled up, and they asked, or ESPN asked specifically about, Caitlin and Asia Wilson, and he said, they haven't had dialogue with them when it comes to either of them when it comes to playing in Unrivaled this season. But he emphasized the door is always open for them to come if they want to. But they're not having, a dialogue at this very moment of either of them joining Unrivaled. And I think especially with how injured Caitlin has been this season, I don't think she would want to adjust to 3-on-3, because that was something I think it was Becky Hammond that talked about how she was trying to make sure the Aces players that played in Unrivaled kind of unlearned those habits they learned in the 3-on-3, because it's a faster paced game. You obviously only have 3 players on the court versus 5. The court is shorter. And I think with Caitlin wanting to come back, I think if anything, she would play in Athletes Unlimited, but I also find that unlikely. I find the most likely thing is her finding 9 other people and playing 5-on-5, which, she's Caitlin Clark. I'm sure she can find 9 other basketball players to play 5-on-5 with her. So I don't see her especially doing Unrivaled just because of it being 3-on-3, and I don't think she'd want to just try to adjust to that while also coming back from injury. And I don't think she would want to risk injury anymore in the offseason.
To Chloe's point, just with that ESPN story, Unrivaled has signed 90% of its rosters for next season and will begin to announce its slate of players at the end of the month. With regards to the top talent, the commissioner said there's always an ongoing dialogue. There's no secret who the top players in the world are, and they know we have a spot for them, but we're not knocking down doors or chasing people down. I feel good about where our rosters stand. And then this new class is headlined by Paige Beckers, who signed a 3-year deal with the league back in April.
Yeah, and there are some rookies. Haley Van Lith is playing. Sanaya Rivers, Sonia Citron are all playing on Unrivaled. Kiki Iriafen said she was in discussions with Unrivaled, but hadn't decided specifically yet.
Do you want to talk at all about the Chicago situation or the drama unfolding out in Connecticut with where that team's going to play moving forward and the sale?
When it comes to Chicago, obviously, I wouldn't be surprised if Angel Reese has played her last game in a Sky uniform, just because of everything that's gone down. I think, obviously the interview she had with the Chicago Tribune, from my perspective, obviously as a journalist, I assume it was a question she was asked about what do you think, the franchise can do to improve the team? Just because, it was league mandated media after a practice, and obviously Angel can't say nothing because the team's missed the playoffs, both seasons she's been on the team. But I think obviously the comments could have gone too far in a way, but, I think there's been what seems to be, even after that Chicago Tribune article came out, more articles came out. There was one from the Sun-Times where, right before that interview, they were talking about this new practice facility that they're building that is also behind schedule. And Angel Reese was pushing for bigger everything because she wants, the Sky she wants her teammates to have, the best amenities possible. And I think there's obviously underlying tension with the Sky organization in general, just because of their lack of facilities right now. They play in a rec gym, or they practice in a rec gym. that's open to the public. They don't have like their own practice locker room spaces. And I think that's obviously an underlying issue when it comes to just the facilities in Chicago, not even just for Angel Reese, but for every player on the team.
Yeah, that's a hairy situation. The Connecticut thing too is going to be an interesting one to follow as the war of words start heating up. In addition to obviously the CBA stuff. Anything else, Chloe, you want to touch on? I'm surprised we've gone almost an hour now, over an hour, and we haven't talked about your favorite show. I would feel remiss and just like a bad teammate if I didn't ask you about The Summer I Turned Pretty.
Well, to anyone who hasn't watched the newest episode, log off now.
Look out now. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Log out now. Thanks for coming. But it's all setting up. The finale is on Wednesday, right? And it's all setting up for Belly and Conrad to reunite in Paris, right? Because there was a big time jump in episode 9 where she basically it was basically a whole year. She spent a whole year in Team Con in Paris. And through all that, Conrad started writing her letters.
Oh, no.
She didn't, not professing his love to him, but, opening a dialogue, as the people say. And she never wrote back for like a year until she moved apartments. And she sent him a postcard that was like, thanks for all your letters. Here's my new address. Meaning she wants him to keep writing her letters.
No.
And then Conrad, he's, a big fancy medical student. He was going to a medical conference in Brussels, which is only an hour and a half train ride from Paris. I don't know if that's legitimate, but that's what it said in the show. It's only an hour and a half train ride from Paris. So he's going to Paris to see her. And the episode ended with her getting a haircut to start a new chapter because she also had a fling with this guy named Benito. And it was like a 5-month fling. And then he was like, you should come to Mexico with me to celebrate my grandma's 80th birthday. And she was like, that's too far. I'm not that serious with you. I don't want to, I don't want to be introduced to your family because I'm not that serious because, she's probably still in love with Conrad. But, she had to go to Paris and find herself without Conrad or Jeremiah. And, she started to find herself. She has friends, but her friend group included Benito, and they were friends with Benito before he and Belly started dating. So I don't know if they're still friends because she obviously broke up with Benito. Benito is finito from what I saw. Mm-hmm. So now she was cutting her hair into a bob, the classic breakup, cut your hair. And then the episode ended with Conrad changing his ticket from Brussels to Paris, which first of all, he should have just flown to Brussels and then took the train into Paris because the fare difference to change his ticket from Brussels to Paris was $500. That's $473. But he could have just gone to Brussels and then gotten the train ticket, which was probably going to be less than $473 to Paris. But anyway, the episode ended with him flying to Paris. So exactly, ride the train. But, he comes from a rich family. Money doesn't mean anything. So anyway, everyone stay tuned for, I like how there were no comments after I started talking about this.
We went from 50 viewers down to 33. I've just been watching with glee as the number just drops down. And I think now is the time when you break that news that you've been sitting on about Caitlin Clark.
I don't have any news. He's joking.
I know. That would have been really funny, though. Just you.
Oh, yes. Somebody responded. Yes. We
Bonrads.
are so up.
Can we say that on this show? Bonrads?
Bonrads, Belly and Conrad.
Perfect. Sending Junior Mint was a power move. Sign of the times. Song choice was insane. And if Belly chooses Summer, unquote.
I will also be a bit annoyed because, technically she can choose herself. And in some ways, I think Conrad is too good for Belly and Belly just needs to go off into the distance by herself. But also we've been waiting so long for Belly and Conrad to get together that if they don't get together, it would be so, so disappointing. We say we have been waiting so long as if I've been watching the show since its inception. I watched all of it on the road trip in August, and now I'm so I've been waiting approximately a month and a half not the 4 years that this show has been airing.
I thought the season was going to be over. I feel like the last time we talked on one of these things, it was like the penultimate episode of the season, and they're still going.
Well, yeah, but they also.
Oh yeah, pardon me.
They also so they had the whole like episode list on their Instagram, and this Wednesday was supposed to be the finale, but then they deleted it.
No.
And there have been a lot of 14s in the episodes.
Ooh.
So people are theorizing that there's going to be
viewers
3
now.
extra episodes.
Perfect. I love that we're starting to gain viewers. Like, imagine being a viewer coming in like, oh, let's go see the Fever Insider and the other guy talk about the Fever series against Atlanta. Then you pop in live immediately, and it's it's the lower third that says Chloe on belly. She had to find herself, and she did.
He did.
That's wonderful stuff. Wonderful stuff. Chloe, why don't you tell the people who are here for the Fever coverage what we have planned for the next for these playoff series?
Well, I'll be in Atlanta. The Fever are practicing in Atlanta tomorrow at some point. They don't know yet, but I'll be there, assuming I get there and nothing happens with my flight. And then they play on Sunday at 3. I'll have coverage from Atlanta. Brian will have coverage from his couch, his house. One of our other people, Josh, I almost called him our intern, but he is no longer the intern. He is full-time. Yay, Josh.
Josh?
He will be running the live vlog. And then, assuming nothing happens, knock on wood, no clock issues, we will have a live show after the game before I fly back at 10:35 p.m. to Indianapolis. So we love Atlanta having like 10 flights a day in between Atlanta and Indianapolis, because that means I can go home same day.
That'll be great. And we'll have post-game shows. Maybe we'll sneak in a midweek show too in between. We'll see how the series goes. At the end of the regular season, we're working on some things there too. We'll have a season wrap show. Maybe we'll have some guests too for these playoff shows. I kind of want to blow them up a little bit. But thanks again to everybody for jumping in, participating, watching, sitting through this all with us. Chloe has her predictions up online too, and we should pump Chloe's coverage too. Has you covered wall to wall in terms of preview stuff. She's at practice today. She'll be practice, like she said, on whatever tomorrow is, Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
So follow her on Twitter. Follow me for, I don't know, vibes, I guess, and to pad my ego. And yeah, that's great. Thank you all so much for watching. We'll be back with you on Sunday talking Fever Dream Game 1. And yeah, talk to you again soon. Bye.
Bye.